Hvala, ker ste se v takšnem številu zbrali. Zelo sem vesel vsakega tukaj, ker smo v centru društva in pa seveda vas. Upam, da ste dobro preživeli teden, da ste kakšne nove informacije slišali. Tukaj se je dogajalo zelo veliko novega smo videli, slišali in se dogaja in se bo še dogajalo. Vendar pa je osnovno načelo, ne bodimo tiho. To je današnje vodilo današnjega 141. Zoom rednega srečanja Društva za srečno življenje BELIS. In preden začnemo, bi jaz priključil seveda najprej na tale naš pregled. In v tem pregledu bomo najprej pogledali čisto na kratko, kaj se bo dogajalo skozi program. Potem pa imam za vas pripravljen en video, o katerem bomo tudi kakšno besedo rekli še kasneje. Dobrodošli, torej na 141. srečanju že, to tako hitro teče. Prej sem malo po arhivu gledal, popoldan sem rekel, mašinca, tole gre pa zelo hitro. Teden se mi zdi kot en dan, mesec kot 2 dni. Zelo hitro se premikajo in dnevi in tedni, meseci in leta, sploh gre zelo hitro. Tukaj imamo, poglejte, na uvodu, za konec, če bo kdo želel vztrajati, čudovit film, ki je vreden ogleda z močnim sporočilom. Kaj se bo dogajalo, si bomo potem pogledali. Za vse tiste, ki boste uspeli seveda film pogledati, kdor pa ne, ima pa vsebino v nadaljevanju, opisano si pa lahko samo vsebino, z vsebino pomaga. Tako, tole pomisleki, ki se jih pred srečanjem nismo zavedali, smo ravno kar videli, da je SARS raziskava, ki so jo razvili ljudje z modelom orožja, ki napada življenjski sistem za dejanski napad na ljudi. To se pravi, gre za napad na ljudi, v bistvu napad na biosistem, na naš imunski sistem, in ljudje seveda imamo različen imunski sistem, različne težave in tudi potem so različni direktni efekti, različni stranski efekti, časovno po injekciji, kdor se je cepil, seveda so to različne časovni presledki, ko se lahko nekaj nekomu pripeti ali pa zgodi ali pa opazi neko spremembo. Gremo naprej na kratek pregled dnevnega reda danes, sobota 11. november 2023 in kot ponavadi pregled zapisnika. Tole je zapisnik, jaz bi se tej za 140. zapisnik iz dne 4.11.23 rad srčno zahvalil. Torej, Teja, srčna hvala. Upam, da ste ga pogledali, prebrali, upam, da se strinjate. Torej, če ima kdo kakšno pripombo na zapisnik, če bi kaj dodal, kaj spremenil, mogoče v naslednjih zapisih, lahko to pripombo da, tako da pripombe odpiram sedaj. Dobro. Sklepam, da je zapisnik 140. rednega srečanja sestanka Društva za srečno življenje BELIS z dne 4.11.2023 s pričetkom ob 18. uri sprejet brez pripomb. Torej, srčna hvala vsem, tako da še en zapisnik bomo arhivirali in ko bomo naredili letno poročilo, bo to kar en zajeten kup dogodkov, ki jih bomo lahko označili v eni knjigi in da bomo videli, kaj vse smo čez leto prehodili. Državljanski osebni izstop iz Svetovne zdravstvene organizacije uredite čim prej, prosim. Marsikdo kliče, ravno prej, ko sem se usedel, sem dobil še eno prošnjo ene članice, tako da bom poklical in se slišimo, zato ker vedo, zdajle ne morem, in bom povedal par stvari, ja, za vse tisto, kar še ni morda jasno. To se pravi izstop, tukaj je ta izstopenca z šifro in naj vam povem, kaj se je zgodilo čisto na kratko. Enemu članu je prišla kuverta nazaj iz Švice in ni vedel, kaj naj naredi. Se pravi, da dobivajo toliko pošte, da zdaj verjetno ne sprejemajo, ali pa je bilo mogoče izjemoma kaj, ker ko plačaš storitev, naj bi bila storitev ok. Ne? No, jaz sem potem seveda takoj odreagiral in sem rekel, to kuverto, ki si jo dobil, če je poškodovana, jo prepakiraj, opremi tako, kot je bila na začetku opremljena, potem pa to isto kuverto daj v novo kuverto. Notranja kuverta je naslovljena osebno na ime in priimek gospoda direktorja, se pravi na dr. Tedrosa, Svetovna zdravstvena organizacija SZO, sedežem tukaj. To gre v kuverto. V drugo, ko to kuverto daste v novo kuverto, pa brez imena in priimka naslovite v bistvu samo to, Svetovna zdravstvena organizacija SZO, sedež WHO in samo pišete pravni osebi. V tej kuverti, ki jo pošiljate pravni osebi, je pa noter kuverta z osebnim naslovom. In ko pride priporočena kuverta tja, ko jo sprejmejo, seveda je ne morejo zavrniti, zaradi tega, ker je to za pravno osebo, in ko jo odprejo, v sprejemnici ne smejo osebne pošte odpirati in jo morajo osebno vročiti. S tem, ko jo osebno vročijo, če se kuverta ne vrne, je izstop avtomatsko urejen. Toliko za to, če se komu še to pripeti, da ne bomo o tem potem še kdaj tako razlagali, sam toliko, da vam povem, kako se to temu streže. Ne spregledajte torkov večer, ta teden smo se imeli zelo v redu, zelo veliko novega smo slišali, tako da vas povabim, da se nam pridružite in bomo spet kaj poklepetali. Če bi pa kdo želel kakšno temo v torek, zdajle, ko se že približujejo jesenski in zimski večeri, kaj pripraviti, kakšno malenkost ali pa za soboto, dobrodošli, dragi člani, da se aktivirate in da date tudi zdajle mogoče kakšno vsebino od sebe. Kdor je pri moči in kdor ima informacije, zmeri ste dobrodošli. Ok, potem bomo imeli pa 18:15, se pravi čez nekaj minut. Gideon Levi, najbolj osovražen človek v Izraelu. Zakaj je najbolj osovražen? Boste razvedeli iz govora, ki ga nikakor ne smete zamuditi. Ta govor bom jaz potem tudi objavil, sem ga tudi že in ga lahko delite s prijatelji zaradi tega, ker človek je živel od predsednika s tem, da se je z njim družil, do vojske je služil, Izrael pozna res do obisti in kar je si zadal v svojem življenju, da bo objektivno poročal. In je vedno šel, vsak dan je šel na teren, ne samo v Izrael, tudi v sosednjo državo in je o tem poročal in nihče ni bil seveda s tem zadovoljen, ker je poročal objektivno. Več o tem kasneje. Po tem filmu bom jaz imel prelom vladavine prava. Če o kriminalu molčiš, zavestno sodeluješ. In to je vedno tako. Marsikdo danes ve, da se veliko stvari dogaja, veliko ljudi je strah samo pomisliti, kaj se dogaja, če so vpleteni v ustanovi, če so vpleteni z svojimi sodelavci in vedo, koliko je goljufij, koliko je laži, koliko je kršitev zakona trenutno v Republiki Sloveniji. To veste, da vsak nacionalni program, ki ga trenutno sprejemajo v Sloveniji, da je v celoti nezakonit, da je brezpraven in temu se reče prelom vladavine prava. Ni še totalen zlom, ampak zaenkrat je prelom. Hvala Bogu, da sem jaz ta prelom videl, opazil, zato delam trenutno, se boste tudi videli, tožbo, veliko tožbo za slovenske prebivalce, za vse nas, sem si vzel čas, zdaj sem nekje 70 strani že pripravil in bom to vložil v imenu slovenskega ljudstva za vsakega izmed nas, ker to, kar se gre, slovenska politika in to, kar iz ozadja delajo, je neverjetno, neverjetne zgodbe in zanimivo, da ljudje, ki so vpleteni, tega sploh ne opazijo. Noben pravnik tudi pomisli ne, zato ker so malo drugače šolani, kot sem jaz šolan in stvari vidim in stvari so dejansko neverjetne. No, potem bo prišla Iviljana, jaz bom o vladavini prava povedal, kaj to je, kako poteka, pa zakaj je dobro, da je. No, Iviljana bo imela pa samo obvladovanje. V težkih razmerah naj se bi človek vedel mirno in tukaj potem po njeni predstavitvi še filmski večer. Da grem še hitro malček to, čez ta daljši redni program, samo tlele malo nižji dol, da vam povem še par stvari. Če kdo je ni imel časa seveda prelistati. Tukaj, gledajte, je statistika, ki smo jo dali. Danes v pismo poskenira in prevzemi formular za izstop iz WHO. V nadaljevanju je prikaz prevzema formularja v zadnjih 30 dneh. Zadnjih 30 dni, se pravi od danes 30 dni nazaj, gledajte, kako se je dvignil prevzem, a ne, pa že tako je prevzelo, mislim, da preko 10.000 ljudi, odkar smo dali prvič formular ven. Ampak v zadnjih dneh, pogledajte, kam grejo cifre. Tako da zdaj 2000 ljudi je v tem mesecu samo prevzelo. Tukaj se vidi, se pravi 900 pa 850 in ko še to vse seštejemo, zraven dobimo cifro. Tukaj sem dal članek, kjer se bojijo, seveda odreagirajo, ker jim ni vseeno, hočejo nas imeti, hočejo na nas služiti, zdravniki, država, farmacija, vsi hočejo služiti. Izstop iz WHO, a ne, tukaj širijo strahove, ki so popolnoma neupravičeni. Ker gre za obratno miselno logiko in za vse obratno, kar počnejo, vemo, da jih tole zelo, zelo skrbi, sicer ne bi bilo takšnega članka. Ta članek sem vam tle objavil in tukaj sem jim še enkrat od spodaj povedal, da mi smo to naredili fizično, s pravno osebo in tu sem dal še enkrat pismo predsednice društva. Tukaj vam pa povem, ali naj Slovenija izstopi iz Svetovne zdravstvene organizacije, sem dal tudi posnetek RTV Slo, kjer si ga lahko pogledate. In pa gledajte, to je pa potem ta tožba v pripravi. Je tožba, kjer si tle lahko samo naslovnico zaenkrat pogledate in pa drugo stran, kakšne so naše pravice in kaj lahko pravzaprav počnemo. Poglejte, za zdravje gre, za naša življenja gre. Kanalizacija v kozarcu vode. Voda je umazana, zrak je umazan, hrana je osrana, vse nam mažejo. Po eni strani, po drugi strani nam pišejo uredbe, kako nas ščitijo, tako da gledajte, to je vse dvojni obraz, dvolično, lažnivo, nesramno in enkrat moramo s temi zadevami zaključiti. Ko se enkrat korporacije tako daleč pretolčejo, da imajo v šahmat politike, da imajo v šahmatu lokalne šerife, s tem mislim župane, da župani delajo v korist korporacij in v korist vlade, namesto v korist ljudi, prebivalcev, ki so ga župana izvolili, je dovolj žalostno. Jaz osebno ne pristajam na pametne vasi in na pametna mesta v taki obliki brez jasnega družbenega konsenza. Mora biti obnovljeno, stvari morajo biti varne že zaradi naših otrok in zaradi nas samih, ampak s to tehnologijo skrito, ki jo postavljajo zaradi nadzora vseh nas, je pa skrajno nepošteno. Glejte, Slovenija zaradi kršitve zakonov in ustave uničujejo zrak, zemljo in vodo ter s tem zdravje in življenje vseh nas. V redu. Tukaj vam povem, Facebook je poslal, kakor ste verjetno tudi vsi dobili odmete, a ne, da tukaj treba plačati 12 evrov na mesec ali pa jim dati podatke. Podatkov jim ne dam, denarja jim tudi ne dam, zaradi tega ne, ker če se spomnijo po meni po 20 letih to narediti, potem rečem samo hvala lepa taki firmi. Evropska unija je pa to naredila iz svoje jasno seveda računice, ker vsaka štala svojo čredo brani. Tako, priporočam vam vsem, torej jaz sem se odločil, da na Facebooku ne, tudi nimam možnosti, ker je tisti kliki, ker nisem pristal na to. Je sicer ena pot, kjer lahko prideš okrog tega, vse se da zaobiditi, da sem danes samo slikce objavil za to, sem zaobšel cel sistem in sem jih objavil, jasno, da sama, ne, saj sem 40 let za računalnikom, marsikaj znam. No, ampak tukaj vam samo povem, s klikom tukaj ali na spodnjo sliko se nam pridružite na Telegramu. Tam imamo precej debat, zanimivo je, precej se objavlja, povabim vas in tudi povejte drugim našim članom. Tako da, dobrodošli tukaj na Telegram. Če bi kdo želel, v društvu lahko naročite članske vizitke na vaše osebne ime, vam jih pripravimo, kdor bi želel imeti, seveda je to fajn. V nadaljevanju arhiv posnetkov in filmov iz preteklih srečanj in s tem sem jaz tole nekako danes zaključil. Glejte, tukaj so zanimive stvari. Najbolj pomemben je to, kaj, glejte, vključen tudi slovenski načrt za okrevanje in odpornost. Nacionalni načrti v Sloveniji so vsi od, se pravi, dirigirane strani mafije, bank, mafije WHO, mafije, jaz oprostite, da tako rečem, ker drugače ne gre. Zato, ker to, kar si ti ljudje upajo, to je nekaj res neverjetnega. In pa tle so še potem ostale stvari in pa filmi, če ste jih zamudili, imate tukaj pretekle filme in naša torkova srečanja in še dodatna predavanja. Tako da, evo, toliko za enkrat, vidite, smo nekaj naredili, nekaj smo pregledali. Zdaj bi pa jaz, tako kot sem vam obljubil, bodite pozorni, kaj bo tale naš gospod povedal, ker to, ko sem jaz tole, se pravi, poslušal, sem bil presenečen, kako z drugimi očmi gledam zdaj na to vojno. S popolnoma drugimi očmi ogledal sem si še potem tudi ene videe, ki so redko dostopni. In ker so redko dostopni, seveda pokažejo vse grozote. Jaz vam moram povedati, da sem ob tem filmu jokal, kaj Izraelci počnejo. Tako da preveč. No. Zdaj pa gremo na tole.
Gideon Levy. He is going to talk about unconditional support for Israel. Does it endanger Israeli voices? As we all know, Gideon Levy is a columnist for the Israeli daily Haaretz and a member of its editorial board. Levy joined Haaretz in 1982 and spent 4 years as the newspaper's deputy editor. He's the author of the weekly Twilight Zone feature, which covers the Israeli occupation in the West Bank and Gaza over the last 25 years, as well as a writer of political editorials for the newspaper. Our Washington Report readers love it when we reprint his powerful columns in our pages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that Mikko left me 2 spare minutes, so I'll be longer. Thank you very much for having me here today. Never was I so convinced that Israel and the United States are really sharing the same values after listening to all those fascinating presentations today, because by the end of the day, we are dealing with 2 regimes which are very, very similar, with 2 regimes that have very little to do with democracy, and I will get to it. I was born in Tel Aviv. I was brought up in Tel Aviv. I was a very good boy at Tel Aviv. I served in the Israeli army. I did even something which is much worse than this. I worked for 4 years with Shimon Peres, then leader of Israeli opposition in the late 70s, early 80s, before most of you were born. And it was only by the late 80s when I started to travel to the occupied territories quite accidentally, when I realized, as a journalist, when I realized that the biggest drama of Israel is taking place half an hour away from our homes, in our dark backyard, that this real drama of Israel has almost no one to be interested in, that it is hidden in the backyard of Israel, half an hour away from our homes. All those crimes are taking place, and we Israelis, most of us, if not all of us, do not want to know, do not know, and above all, do not care. And it took me many, many years to understand how come. How come that a society, some of you met Israelis, they are not monsters. Every catastrophe in the world, the Israelis are always the first one to send rescue teams with field hospitals. Many Israelis would help any old lady to cross the road many times, even if she doesn't want to cross the road. People with values. How come that this society lives for so many years with this drama in its backyard and feels so good about itself and has so little moral doubts, if at all? How is it possible? How is it possible that most of the Israelis, if not all of them, are deeply convinced that the IDF is the most moral army in the world? Try to tell an Israeli, and I tried it once or twice, you know what, maybe it's the second moral army in the world. Maybe the army of Luxembourg is more moral. I don't know if Luxembourg has an army at all. They will be deeply offended. How can you dare? How come that when this reality is taking place so close to our homes, not over the oceans, but just half an hour away from our homes, how come that we live in peace with it, that we continue with it, that there is no resistance, almost nothing? And here I want to object to what my friend Miko said. When I got first the invitation to come here, the first words were Israel lobby. I said, wow, they invite me. AIPAC is inviting me. And then I said, that's the chance of my life. And I'm going to come there to Washington and to tell them, listen, with friends like yours, Israel does not need enemies. But unfortunately, but then I continued to read, and I read that I'm privileged to be invited to another forum, not exactly AIPAC, and even not the Anti-Defamation League. But I can say it from here, Miko. I think that we are dealing with a corrupting friendship. I think that if it wouldn't be the Israel lobby, Israel would have been today a better place to live in. Israel would have been a more just place. And I think that if it wouldn't be the Israel lobby, the United States would have been a better place and a more democratic place. But it's not for me to judge the American politics. And still, by the end of the day, we are dealing with an enigma, because nothing can really explain it. Nothing can explain how administration after administration, legislators after legislators, are going in the very same way, which contradicts American interest in so many cases, which contradicts international law, human rights, moral values, you name it. Can it be only this small group, as powerful as it is? Is it the full explanation? I doubt it, but that's for you to decide, not for us in Israel. But for us in Israel, or at least for me, it is very clear. Think about a relative of yours or a friend of yours who is, God forbid, a drug addict. There are two ways to deal with him. One is to supply him with money, and he will go and buy more drugs. He will be very grateful to you. He will appreciate you. He will tell you, you love me, you are my friend, you are my best friend. The other way is to send him to a rehabilitation center. He will be so mad at you. But what is real care? And what is real love? And what is real friendship? And does anyone in this hall have the slightest doubt that Israel is occupation addicted? But, and therefore for me, this conference here is so crucial and so important, because we have to face reality. And reality is that there is no chance for a change from within the Israeli society. No way. I'll try to explain why. But if this is the case, the only hope is for an international intervention. And the only hope is from this place, from Washington, from the United States, from the EU, only from there. Because the Israeli society is by far today too brainwashed. Life in Israel is by far too good. And Israel, let's face it, is a society which lives in denial, totally disconnected with reality. Would it be a private person? I would recommend either medications or hospitalization, because people who lose connection with reality might be very dangerous, either to themselves or to society. And the Israeli society lost connection with reality. It lost connection with the reality in its backyard. It's totally lost connection with the international environment. Really to believe that 5 million Jews know better than 6 billion people of the world? Really believe that 5 million Jews will be able to continue to live on their sword forever? Is there one example in history in which any country lived on its sword forever? Empires? Really believing that in the 21st century it is acceptable to ignore the international law in such a way, to ignore the international institutions, and to rely only on the United States and Micronesia. Let's not forget this friend of Israel. And recently also Czech Republic. Thank you, Czech Republic. And Canada, your neighbor, obviously. Does it work? Had it ever worked? So therefore it is so crucial for people like me to see any kind of change here in the United States. And we jump on any sign. When J Street was established, we say, yeah, here it comes. And it didn't come. When Obama was elected, I had tears in my eyes. I said, here it comes. And it didn't come. And when I see conferences like here today, again, it gives me some hope that change might happen. Because change will have to take place here. In Israel, it's a lost case. Forget about it. The Israeli society had surrounded itself with shields, with walls, not only physical walls, but also mental walls. I don't want to get into it because it's another lecture, but I'll just give the 3 principles which enable us Israelis to live so easily with this brutal reality. A, most of the Israelis, if not all of them, deeply believe that we are the chosen people. And if we are the chosen people, we have the right to do whatever we want. B, there were more brutal occupations in history. There were even longer occupations in history, even though the Israeli occupation gets to quite a nice record. But there was never in history an occupation in which the occupier presented himself as the victim. Not only the victim, the only victim around. This also enables any Israeli to live in peace because we are the victims. The other day, Professor Falk spoke about this dual strategy of Israel of being a victim on one hand and manipulating the other on the other hand. After what happened in Paris and in Copenhagen with the terror attacks, Benjamin Netanyahu came with the notion all the Jews must come to Israel. It's the safest place for the Jews in the world. It's a shelter for the Jews in the world. Which is wrong, because Israel is today the most dangerous place on earth for Jews, but let's put it aside. It was only 24 hours later when he said Israel is an existential threat under the Iranian bomb. And I asked myself, how can you dare call Jews to come and to join this suicidal project when the Iranians are going to bomb us? But in Israel, everything goes, and both declarations were accepted as the only truth. And here I get to the third set of values which enable us Israelis to live in peace with the occupation. And this is maybe the most crucial one and the worst one. We say victimization, we say chosen people. When I say victimization, it goes without saying we have to mention the Holocaust and the unforgettable Mrs. Golda Meir that the American jury had exported to Israel. She said once, this unforgettable woman, that after the Holocaust, the Jews have the right to do whatever they want. But the third set of values is the most dangerous one, and this is the systematic dehumanization of the Palestinians, which enable us, Israelis, to live in peace with everything. Because if they are not human beings like us, then there is not really a question of human rights. And if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you will find it there. Almost no one will treat the Palestinians as equal human beings like us. I once wrote that we treat the Palestinians like animals, and I got so many protest letters from animal rights organizations, rightly so. But by the end of the day, how many Israelis did ever try for a moment to put themselves in the place of the Palestinians for a moment, for one day? And I want to give you two examples which will demonstrate it. Many years ago, I interviewed then candidate for Prime Minister, Ehud Barak. And I asked him a question which I try to ask in any occasion. Mr. Barak, what would have happened if you would have been born Palestinian? And Barak gave me then the only honest answer he could give me. He said I would have joined a terror organization. What else would have he done? Would he become a poet? He doesn't know to write poems. Would he become a pianist? He's quite a bad pianist, and I doubt if he would have become a collaborator, because he is a fighter. And it became a scandal, because how can you dare to put Ehud Barak to think what would have happened if he would have become a Palestinian? And the second incident, briefly, Second Intifada, the city of Jenin, the most closed city in the West Bank, real total siege. I go out from Jenin, I come to the checkpoint, a Palestinian ambulance is parking there with the red lights. I stand after him, no cars can get out of Jenin in those days, no cars can get in, and I wait. The soldiers are playing backgammon in the tent. Usually I know myself, it's better that I don't get into a confrontation with the soldiers because it always ends up very badly. So I stayed in the car, but after 40 minutes I couldn't take it, and I went out to the car. From the car, I went first to the Palestinian ambulance driver and I asked him, what's going on? He told me that's the routine, they let me wait 1 hour until they come and check the ambulance. And I couldn't take it anymore, and I went to the soldiers. It became a confrontation, but the question that I asked them, which really brought them to direct their weapons toward me, was one. What would have happened if your father would have been lying in this ambulance? This freaked them out. They lost control. How can I dare to compare between their father and the Palestinian in the ambulance? And this set of beliefs that they are not human beings like us enable us, Israelis, to live in so much peace with those crimes, ongoing crime for so many years, with losing any kind of humanity, values. I heard today people talk about Jewish values. I must be frank with you, I don't know what are Jewish values. I know what are universal values. Let's not get into it, really. There are very clear universal values. And there is a very, very clear international law. But for most of the Israelis, international law is very important. But not for Israel. Israel is a special case. Why is it a special case? And again, you get with all those set of values, with this living in denial. And here I want to get back to the topic of our panel. Is it good for Israel? No, it's very corrupting. Because as long as the United States enable Israel to continue, obviously the Palestinians are the first and direct, unbelievable victim of it. But by the end of the day, what will Israel be after all those years? What is it already today? Where does it direct to? And things are getting worse and worse. And therefore I have so little hope about change from within the Israeli society. Because things, as you might know, are going more and more to the nationalistic, militaristic, religious direction, with very little hope that change will come from within. Why would Israelis go for a change? What incentive? Why would they bother? Life is so good. You should have seen Israel in the days when Gaza was bombed, when the beaches were crowded, the helicopters were passing on their way to bomb Gaza. The Israeli TV hardly showed photos from there. Newspapers hardly wrote anything. I wrote one article about the responsibility of the pilots, and I needed to use bodyguards to get out of my home after this. The problem was, by the way, that the bodyguards were settlers, and they argued with me all day long until I saw that I'm much more secure without the bodyguards rather than with them. But the last war in Gaza, and this will be my final remarks, the last war in Gaza taught us also that Israel, which has 3 regimes today, maybe the only country, the only state in the world with 3 regimes, one for the Jews, one for the Arab citizens, and an apartheid regime in the West Bank and Gaza, one of the most brutal and cruel tyrannies in the world. But even for the facade, even for this democracy, which I always thought is a democracy for its Jewish citizens, I realized last summer that it is a democracy for its Jewish citizens, but only if they think like the majority. And therefore, and by this I want to conclude, I want to tell you all that few of us, very few, much too few, but few of us are looking to the West, Europe, and then United States, with a great hope, because we lost hope in Israel. Thank you very much.
Well, now I'm afraid we're going to need a bodyguard to help you leave Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your remarks.
Spoštovani člani, to, kar pišejo mediji, kar se rola po televizijah in kar družbena omrežja na silo, kako rečejo temu pushing, ne? Prisiljujejo, da nekaj gledaš z algoritmi, se pravi po push sistemi, da to pritiskajo, če ne drugače, da zgleda kot reklama ali pa sploh ni reklama, zgleda kot objava in niti ne prepoznaš, da je reklama. Ljudje ne poznajo resnice, ne poznajo obeh slik, ne poznajo druge plati in zato se dogajajo stvari tako, kot se dogajajo. Tako da stremimo k temu, da odkrivamo obe plati in potem objektivno ocenimo stanje, kajti samo v takem stanju se človek lahko potem tudi pametno odloči za dejanja in za odločitve v svojem življenju.